you're huddled with maybe 1,000 humans, maybe fewer. It's roughly 70,000 years ago, somewhere in East Africa. The sun is setting and you can feel the fever starting in someone nearby. There's no hospital, there's no medicine, there's no understanding of what a pathogen even is. There's just bodies breaking down, immune systems failing, and the very real possibility that your entire species, every ancestor of every person who would ever live, might not make it through the next few generations. And somehow, impossibly, a handful of you survived. Not most of you, a handful. Because here's the thing they don't teach you in history class. Humanity almost didn't happen. We came terrifyingly close to extinction. And the thing that nearly killed us all wasn't a predator, wasn't a volcano, wasn't starvation. It was something we couldn't see, couldn't fight, and barely understood until about 150 years ago. This is the story of the first disease that nearly wiped out humans. Not the Black Death, not smallpox, not the 1918 flu pandemic. We're talking about something older, something that hit us when there were so few humans on Earth that you could theoretically count them all in a few days. And why that matters right now in 2024, sitting wherever you are. Because here's the thing nobody tells you. Every single person alive today, all 8 billion of us, descended from a population that may have dropped below 10,000 individuals. Some estimates put it closer to 1,000 breeding pairs. We are all the children of an apocalypse survivors group. Let's start with the evidence, because this isn't speculation. This is written in your DNA right now. In the late 1990s, geneticists started noticing something strange. When they analyzed the mitochondrial DNA from populations across the world, they found what's called a genetic bottleneck, a point where human genetic diversity suddenly, dramatically collapsed. The dating? Somewhere between 50,000 and 100,000 years ago, with the strongest evidence clustering around 70,000 years ago. Stanley Ambrose, an anthropologist at the University of Illinois, proposed in 1998 that this bottleneck coincided with the Toba supervolcanic eruption in Indonesia, one of the largest volcanic events in the last 2 million years. The theory was straightforward. Volcano explodes, volcanic winter follows, humans nearly go extinct. But here's where it gets interesting. The volcanic winter theory has problems. Recent archaeological evidence from India, right in Toba's blast radius, shows human populations continuing relatively undisturbed through the eruption. Tools from before and after are basically identical. No mass extinction event in the immediate aftermath. So what did nearly kill us? The answer might be something that hitched a ride during the climate chaos. Disease. Not one disease, probably several, working in combination, hitting a small, stressed, malnourished population that had just been knocked on its ass by environmental catastrophe. Here's where we need to talk about what diseases can do to small populations, because the math is brutal. When you have a large, spread-out population, a disease outbreak is bad. People die, communities suffer, but the species continues. When you have a small, fragmented population already under environmental stress, a single epidemic can be existential. Research published in 2018 by Yair Ben-Dor and Ran Barkai at Tel Aviv University suggests that ancient human populations in Africa went through multiple collapse and recovery cycles, not smooth population growth, violent crashes followed by slow rebuilding. The candidates for what nearly killed us? Malaria is high on the list, so is tuberculosis, possibly parasitic infections that became lethal in malnourished populations, maybe hemorrhagic fevers similar to Ebola. And here's the uncomfortable part. We'll probably never know for sure which specific pathogen it was. Diseases don't leave fossils. Bacteria and viruses don't survive in 70,000-year-old bone. Usually. What we have is the genetic shadow, the evidence that something catastrophic happened and only a tiny fraction of humanity made it through. Let's talk about what that genetic bottleneck actually means, because the numbers are staggering. Modern humans have less genetic diversity than almost any other large mammal species. Chimpanzees, despite having far smaller populations today, have significantly more genetic variation than humans. Why? Because we went through a near-extinction filter. The diversity that existed before 70,000 years ago, the lineages, the genetic variations, the adaptations, most of it died out. What survived was a small founder population, probably in East Africa, probably clustered in climate refuges where conditions were slightly less catastrophic. A 2008 study by Harpending and colleagues, analyzing genetic diversity across global populations, found that this bottleneck was followed by rapid expansion, the signature of a small population exploding outward once conditions improved. That expansion is what populated the entire world, every human outside Africa, every civilization, every empire, every person reading this sentence. Now here's the question that should be sitting in the back of your mind. What made that small group special? Were they genetically lucky, maybe carrying immune variants that helped them survive? Were they geographically lucky, living in the right place at the right time? Were they behaviorally adaptable, changing their diets, their shelters, their social structures fast enough to outlast the crisis? Probably all three, which is itself extremely unusual. Here's the part of this video that hits different after 2020. What ancient humans experienced 70,000 years ago, a novel pathogen, or pathogens, spreading through a vulnerable population with no immunity, no medical infrastructure, and no understanding of disease transmission, is the same fundamental crisis we faced with COVID-19. The difference is scale and knowledge. We had hospitals, vaccines, epidemiology, global coordination, sort of. We had the germ theory of disease. We had antiviral medications and ventilators and contact tracing. And it still killed millions. It still disrupted every aspect of civilization for years. Ancient humans had none of that. They had immune systems, behavioral adaptations, and luck. And somehow, barely, it was enough. The rates of mortality in small, isolated populations hit by novel diseases are well documented. When Europeans brought smallpox to the Americas, some indigenous populations lost 90% or more of their people within a generation. Now imagine that happening to the entire human species, when there were only tens of thousands of us to begin with. So what was the first disease that nearly wiped out humans? The honest answer is we don't know exactly, and we probably never will. The genetic evidence takes us back 70,000 years with some confidence, and possibly much further with reasonable speculation. The pathogen, or more likely pathogens, left no fossils, no written records, no named victims, just a genetic scar written into every human genome on Earth. What we do know is this: the bottleneck is real. It happened. The population collapsed to numbers that would qualify as critically endangered if we were any other species. The recovery was real. A small founding population in Africa survived, adapted, and eventually spread across the entire planet. And the vulnerability is still real. We are a low genetic diversity species. We're all much more closely related than we think, which means we're all potentially vulnerable to the same pathogens in similar ways. There's something almost humbling about that. For all the things that separate modern humans from our ancestors, the medicine, the technology, the ability to sequence a virus in days, there are these thin strands of continuity that run unbroken through 70,000 years of survival. Fever, immune response, the body's ancient war against invasion. Your immune system right now, the one fighting off whatever low-grade infection you're currently ignoring, is descended from the immune systems that won that war 70,000 years ago. The ones that didn't, they're not here. Their descendants aren't here. That branch of the human family tree ends in an unmarked grave somewhere in prehistoric Africa. You exist because your ancestors, against brutal odds, survived something that killed almost everyone else. Next time you fight off a cold, next time your fever breaks, next time your body does the thing it's been doing for thousands of generations, you're participating in something far older than you realize. You're doing what humans have always done. You're surviving.